Joining us on the line is my quasi-friend, Michael Knowles, who's been watching all of this with, I would say, a sufficient amount of outrage, given his Twitter account. Michael, I've never obviously seen anything like this. No one's ever seen anything like this. It's truly a horrifying day for the country.
Horrifying.
On every possible level.
I have here on my desk a flag that was flying at Justice Alito's house, for which he got in trouble. It's an American Revolutionary War flag. It says an appeal to heaven. Supposedly, according to the left, to fly such a flag that was raised by George Washington and made by his aide-de-camp, that makes us the insurrectionists and the threat to democracy. You, of course, said it very, very well. I think most people are going to look at this and say the Democrats are the real threat to our political order. And not just a threat. They have impaled our political order. We had a 234-year and 4-month agreement not to prosecute presidents, former presidents, and major party nominees. We just had never done that. And so you got to ask yourself, why is it? Did we not prosecute these people because they never commit crimes? No, actually, they've committed plenty of crimes. The current president has committed some crimes. 2 presidents ago, Barack Obama, he definitely committed some crimes. So why have we not done it? One of the reasons we've not done it is that it is not possible to have an impartial jury when you're talking about the top politician in the country. Everybody has a view. This is the chief executive. This is a man who, in his person, represents the country and the spirit of the people. So it can't happen, and it's always going to be kind of a kangaroo court, which is why from the beginning, I think we all knew this was a kangaroo court. It seemed very rigged. The judge, Merchan, in this case, seemed nakedly partisan and political. The charges were basically incoherent. One of them really should have been a federal charge. One, you couldn't, is it a felony? Is it a misdemeanor? If it's a misdemeanor, it's actually past the statute of limitations. But I didn't really care about any of the legal argument because of that fact that it's so obviously a political question. So when I was looking at it this morning, we're all waiting for the results. I said the only thing that is going to determine the outcome in this case is whether or not a secret conservative snuck onto the jury. That's pretty much it. Yep. If that person is pro-Trump, and I looked through, the New York Times did a little biography of each of the jurors, and I said, well, that person says that she listens to religious podcasts. Maybe, I don't know. This person, he lives on the Upper East Side, but he works in finance. I don't know, maybe, but there is no chance, right? We're talking about Manhattan jurors. I think Trump got about 3 votes in Manhattan in 2020. The whole thing was a setup from day one. And what's so sad about it is Trump might get a little political boost here in the sense that people are going to recognize this is unfair. There was one poll on the federal case. 62% of Americans view the federal charges as being primarily politically motivated. So people know what's up in America. But from the historical perspective, you can't put the genie back in the bottle. 235 years almost of an agreement not to behave like a banana republic, a tin pot dictatorship that is out the window. Democrats did it, and it can't be undone.
Well, President Biden apparently will not address Trump's conviction tonight, so apparently they weren't able to get a hold of enough Adderall to get him up and in front of a TV. He has made a statement, as we mentioned earlier, in which he talked about how now everyone is being accountable before the law, which is an incredible statement from a man who clearly violated classified documents law himself and was openly held to have done so by the DOJ lawyer, Robert Hur, who literally said the only reason that he didn't prosecute him is because he's a senile old dotard. That's literally what he says. And now he's out there saying that obviously, the real threat to democracy is the guy who is being convicted of crimes that don't exist in a Democrat courtroom. This is the part that is truly astonishing. And I think that you are going to see an enormous consolidation around Trump. Certainly people who are lukewarm on Trump, maybe the people who supported Nikki Haley at the end of the primaries, or people who are DeSantis supporters and we're still kind of waiting to jump all the way back on the Trump bandwagon. That's over now. You're going to get 100% adherence to Trump on the right. But I think independents, too, are going to look at this and they are going to say that Donald Trump is being victimized here. He is clearly being victimized here. And in a certain weird political way, I think this is quite good for Trump because one of the things is that Trump likes to talk about Trump. I mean, that's just the reality of who Donald Trump is as a candidate. Well, there were only really 2 topics on which he was speaking in the past few months. One was the January 6th, 2020 election stuff. And 2 were the trials. And the trials, it's fine for him to talk about. That is a fine political thing for him to talk about because there you are talking about the serious issue of one party mobilizing the instruments of government in order to victimize members of the opposing party. And that is a much better campaign for him to run than anything related to 2020. I mean, if they get to a debate and Joe Biden says January 6th was a threat to democracy, Donald Trump should say, and I'm sure he will, you mobilizing every piece of the Justice Department from state to federal in order to convict your political opponent in advance of an election you're losing, that seems to be much more of a threat to democracy than anything that I've done. I mean, I think the door is wide open on Biden and team because of this conviction. I mean, this is the astonishing point here, is that they really thought that by convicting Trump, they were going to finish his candidacy. And instead, all they've done is create just another label they can throw at him. But what they've really done is shape Americans' perceptions of them. Like right now, I want to get your take on this, Michael. I'm hearing a lot of people out there on the right, and they're like, well, Republican DA should start immediately indicting Democratic politicians. I don't think that's right, because I think the American people don't like what they're seeing. If the American people were fine with what they're seeing, I think that that's totally right, because I think what's good for the goose is good for the gander. But I actually think that this is a political win for Republicans in the sense that they're not the party tearing down democracy right now. It is the Democrats who are indicting their political opponents, dragging them up in blue areas where they don't even live, and then threatening them with jail time. By the way, I think Mershon is going to sentence him to jail. I think that you can't. I think Chekhov's gun must be used. I think that if you get this far, if you're Mershon, you're going to go all this way. I don't think you go all this way just to sentence him to probation.
If you come at the king, you best not miss, to quote The Wire, who is quoting more elegant sources. Of course, Merchant has to sentence him to jail. And I agree with you that politically this looks good. The Democrats are stepping on a rake, and Trump can be a martyr, and sort of is a martyr now. I think it's totally legitimate. What worries me, though, is how brazen this is, and how increasingly brazen the Democrats have become. That can have a positive political effect for them as well, because it can demoralize conservatives. So yes, conservatives are going to rally around Trump, and independents are going to rally around Trump, and everyone's going to be outraged by this. But they did it, and they're getting away with it, at least for now, just like they got away with changing a lot of election rules. In some cases in contravention of state constitutions, let's say like in Pennsylvania, just like they got away with spying on the Trump campaign, just like they got away with undermining his administration and arresting some of his associates, just like they get away with this and that and this and that, and they never pay a consequence for it. We were talking about the crimes that Joe Biden has apparently committed. Just 2 days ago, he visited Hallie Biden, the widow of his son and former mistress of his other son. This was days before the Hunter Biden gun crimes trial. Hallie Biden is going to be an important witness in the gun crimes trial because allegedly she seems to have helped him to commit those crimes. Any reasonable person looking at that meeting says that's witness tampering. One of the things that you're accusing Donald Trump of doing, you, sitting President Biden, are doing yourself. And what do? They shrug their shoulders, he licks his ice cream cone, and they don't care. So yes, this will mobilize public opinion against Biden. The really demoralizing question is, how much does public opinion still matter in elections?
Yeah, Michael, as you say, when it comes to the glass being broken, you can't unbreak this glass. It is worth noting at this point that if Joe Biden does not win this next election, he will undoubtedly be prosecuted. Undoubtedly. I mean, we have now, but this is not glass that goes back in place. I mean, the reality is that he is now running to basically keep himself and his son out of jail. So you now have a political system in which people who are running for the presidency have to first consider whether they are going to be unfairly brought up on charges. And then they have to consider that if they lose, there's a good shot they go to jail. I mean, that is where we currently sit. Now, listen, there are other democracies around the world where there have actually been sitting politicians who have ended up in jail after losing office, after being elected to high office or whatever it is. But in those particular cases, those cases happen to be incredibly well-founded. What makes this such a travesty is that it was so incredibly not well-founded from the very get-go, from the beginning. This was the weakest of any of the cases being brought against President Trump. And what it really says is that if you get the January 6th trial in Washington, D.C., he'll get convicted there. Yeah. If you're down in Florida in the classified documents trial, probably a hung jury. If you're over in Atlanta, depending on the jury selection, probably gets convicted. Right? This is now a game of simple forum shopping. And this happens all the time in civil litigation. You try to find the forum where the jury is going to be most available to you. But if you're a national candidate like Donald Trump and you're being brought up in 4 different jurisdictions on 4 different sets of charges, it's completely dependent on the nature of the population in the area in which you are being charged, which makes a mockery of justice. That's not one standard for all. That is, do they like you? And essentially it makes it a referendum on you electorally, except if you lose the election, you go to jail.
Exactly. You're talking about the chief skill and charge of a politician, which is to go out and get people to like them. Well, we have a venue for that. That takes place within the legislature and the elections for legislators and for the presidency. That's not supposed to take place in the judicial branch. Understood from a philosophical standpoint, the three branches of government are supposed to correspond to the tripartite soul. The legislature is supposed to be the passionate, emotional, appetitive part. The executive is supposed to be the spirited part, the thumatic part of the soul. But the judicial part of the government is supposed to be logical, disinterested, cool, Lady Justice with a blindfold on. And I don't think any person today, even the most partisan Democrat, would be able to look you in the face and tell you sincerely that Lady Justice still has her blindfold on. Not a chance.
Well, Michael Knowles, go take a listen to the Michael Knowles Show. Really, thanks for your commentary, and terrible day for the country. Try and have a Mayflower cigar and relax a little bit before you pop a blood vessel over there.
Yeah.
I appreciate the time.
Thanks, Ben.